Who is making your decisions? You'll say, I am, but which one? The you that stays up too late, or the you that sets the early alarm, the you that orders dessert, or the you that goes to the gym, the you that falls in love recklessly, or the you that writes the pros and cons list? These aren't moods, they aren't versions of you. According to neuroscience, they are genuinely distinct systems with different neural architectures, different response patterns, different access to your own history, and none of them is the real you. Because there is no real you, there is only the committee, and the committee has no chairperson. That feeling you have right now of being a single, unified person reading this is one of the most convincing illusions your brain has ever produced. And by the time this is over, you will not be able to feel it the same way again. Let's start with the architecture. Your brain is not a unified organ with a single voice. It is a collection of specialized systems that evolved at different times for different purposes with different priorities. The prefrontal cortex, the region behind your forehead, handles long-term planning, consequence evaluation, impulse control. It is slow, deliberate, energy expensive. It is the part of you that writes 5-year plans and sets gym reminders. But the limbic system, older, faster, deeper, handles emotion, threat response, reward seeking. It does not consult the prefrontal cortex. It does not ask permission. When something frightens you, the amygdala fires before the rational brain has even registered what happened. When something pleasurable appears, the reward circuitry activates before the planning systems can intervene. These systems do not always agree. In fact, they frequently conflict. And the experience of internal conflict, I know I shouldn't, but I want to, is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is the sound of your committee voting. Two genuinely different neural systems with genuinely different agendas pulling the same body in opposite directions. This is where our intuition completely breaks down. In the 1960s, neurosurgeon Roger Sperry conducted experiments that should have permanently changed how humanity thinks about the self. His subjects were split-brain patients, people whose corpus callosum, the thick bundle of fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres, had been surgically severed to treat severe epilepsy. What Sperry discovered was extraordinary. When he presented information exclusively to the right hemisphere through the left visual field, the patients could not verbally describe what they had seen. The right hemisphere has no language, it cannot speak, but it could act. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, could pick up the correct object, point to the right answer, respond accurately to what it had been shown. Two streams of consciousness, two separate awareness centers, one skull, one body, one name on the driver's license. In some patients, the conflict became visible and almost darkly comic. One hand buttoning a shirt while the other unbuttoned it. One hand reaching for a piece of food while the other pushed it away. Two agents, one body, no central coordinator. Sperry won the Nobel Prize for this work in 1981. The implication was clear, even if the scientific community was slow to follow it all the way to its conclusion. The unified self is not a biological reality. It is a narrative, a story the brain tells about itself after the fact to make sense of the competing outputs of its many subsystems. But wait, it gets stranger. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga, who worked closely with Sperry, identified something he called the interpreter, a module located primarily in the left hemisphere, whose job is not to experience reality, but to explain it, to take whatever the brain has just done, whatever the body has just felt, and generate a plausible narrative that makes it all seem intentional, coherent, and authored by a single self. Here is the disturbing part. The interpreter doesn't know what the other systems are doing. It only sees the outputs. It sees the hand reaching for the dessert, and it generates a story. I decided to treat myself. It sees the body freezing in a social situation, and it generates a story. I chose to observe rather than engage. It sees the impulsive purchase and it generates a story. I deserved it. I needed it. It was a rational decision. The interpreter is extraordinarily convincing. It works in real time with complete confidence, and its output, the story of you, feels like lived experience rather than post hoc rationalization. But it is rationalization. The decision came first, the story came second, and the story is authored by a system that was not present when the decision was made. You are not the author of your behavior, you are the narrator, and there is a difference. Think about how differently you behave in different contexts, with your closest friend versus your boss, alone at midnight versus in a crowded room, when you're hungry versus when you've just eaten, when you're frightened versus when you feel safe. You might say, those are all still me, just different sides of me. But neuroscience pushes back on that comfort. Research on context-dependent memory, on state-dependent behavior, on the neuroscience of social cognition shows that these aren't simply different expressions of a stable underlying self. Different contexts activate genuinely different neural configurations, different networks, different hormonal profiles, different access to memories, different threat assessments, different values hierarchies. The person who snapped at someone they loved last Tuesday was not suppressing their true self. They were being run by a neural configuration, stress-activated, sleep-deprived, threat-responsive, that has its own behavioral repertoire. The person who apologized the next morning was being run by a different configuration with different priorities and better access to long-term relational values. Both configurations share your name. Both feel, from the inside, like you, but they are not the same system. And no master system sits above them, pulling the strings. The committee votes. The loudest system in that moment wins. And the interpreter writes the memoir. And here is where this stops being unsettling and starts being something else entirely. If there is no fixed central self, if what you call I is a shifting coalition of systems, a committee with no permanent chair, then the rigid story you carry about who you are becomes something more negotiable than you thought. The labels you've accepted, I'm not a creative person, I'm not someone who can change, I'm just like this. Those are the interpreter talking. They are the narrator's summary of past committee votes. They are not the Constitution. The committee can be influenced. New experiences activate new systems. New environments amplify different networks. The system that feels dominant today was not always dominant, and it will not always remain so. The person you are in 10 years will share your name and your memories and your body, and will be running on a meaningfully different coalition of neural priorities. You are not stuck being you, because you were never just one you to begin with. The committee is in session, and every moment is a new vote. There is no ghost in this machine, no CEO of the self, no homunculus sitting behind your eyes making choices, watching the film of your life. There is only process. Millions of neurons firing in patterns, competing and cooperating, generating behavior, and then generating stories about that behavior. And the strangest part? The story feels real. The self feels unified. The chairperson feels present. Because the interpreter is very, very good at its job. But now you know what it is. And knowing what it is changes what it can do to you. If this cracked something open in how you understand yourself, subscribe. Because there's more where this came from. And each one goes somewhere you didn't expect to go.